Welcome back, Heat Seekers. Happy week 2 is in the books, almost. Hopefully it treated you well. This episode, we are going to help you get ready for week 3 with the waiver wires you need to add to help be successful.
Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
All right. So, as always, if you guys want to see the written version of this, rotoheat.com. If you want to get all our other start sits and other different pieces of content that we put out, rotoheat.com, rotoheat.com, rotoheat.com. With that being said, Mr. Sullivan, how's it going? What's going on in your world?
Hey, man, things are good. Frustrating day from a personal fan standpoint of football, but nonetheless, it's a day full of football. So how bad could it really be?
Very true. And for those listening in the background, I have a stinking dog who decides, as every time I go live, to come to the kitchen and decide to join us on the show with his drinking. That's ridiculous. So with that being said, quarterbacks, who are we talking about?
Well, we got 3. We got Sam Darnold of the Carolina Panthers. We got Daniel Jones of the New York Giants and Kirk Cousins of my sad sack Minnesota Vikings. So, Sam Darnold, we talked about it, all offseason as soon as he got traded. I guess we even started talking about it when it looked like Adam Gase was finally leaving New York, that Sam Darnold, without Adam Gase, maybe he just needed to change the scenery. Maybe he just needed a new team, a new look, or whatever it is. So 2 games, he's 50 for 73, 584 yards and 3 touchdowns and a pick. So I think he looks pretty good. If you're in a bind at quarterback, if you lost Ryan Fitzpatrick in week 1, if you're struggling with Lamar Jackson and wondering what to do with him, you need a second quarterback, I think Sam Darnold's a guy you can add. Same thing with Daniel Jones. Looked really good on Thursday night, using his legs a ton. Love that he's bringing you that upside with his rushing. And Cousins has been super efficient. He's just not winning football games. But for fantasy, who cares? He was damn near perfect in the first half today. He had a good game against Cincinnati, and he's throwing touchdown passes. So I think any one of these 3, all of them are in that 25 or less rostered percentages on both platforms. Cousins is a little weird. He's 64% on Yahoo, 25% on ESPN, but they should all be readily available if you're looking for a quarterback.
Yeah, and for me, I think Darnold and then Jones and then Cousins kind of my ranking. So if you're out there in your waiver priority and you're trying to figure out who's the most important, like Darnold faces Houston on Thursday night without 100%. Tyrod Taylor. Daniel Jones gets a sweet matchup against the Falcons, who just obviously they didn't let. Tom Brady did whatever he wanted. And then Kirk Cousins has a decent matchup against Seattle. It's not a team that's a lockdown team. He's going to be throwing a bunch. You really can't go wrong with any of these 3 guys. I totally agree with you. And I would even throw in, I think last week we mentioned Taylor Heineke. If you haven't picked him up on your waiver wires, he's another guy that definitely needs to be in consideration because he can run, he can pass, does a lot of different things there. So, there's a few options out there that can help keep you in the running for a championship if you're in trouble at QB.
Agree 100%.
All right, so what do we got at running back?
Well, we got 3 of those as well. James White of the New England Patriots, Sony Michel of the Los Angeles Rams, and Michael Carter of the New York Jets. So James White, I think, kind of got forgotten in this whole backfield. He had that unfortunate incident losing his parents last year that really seemed to affect his season, understandably. Didn't really mesh with Cam Newton very well, but he seems to be working out quite well with Mac Jones. He's getting some carries. He's had 6 receptions in 2 straight games. So if you play in a league that rewards receptions, James White, to me, is the guy to go and get. Sony Michel, thought he was in a really good situation when he got traded to Los Angeles. He had 1 carry in week 1, and I was thinking maybe I was wrong. Darrell Henderson got a little banged up in this one and left it early, and Sony came on and looked real good. So if Henderson's out, then I think Sony's the number 1 back in the Rams backfield. And that, going all the way back to Todd Gurley, has always been, regardless of who it is, it's always been a good guy to have. And Michael Carter, kind of 4th guy off the bench in the preseason, slowly making his way up the depth charts in New York. I don't know if he's someone that I'm going to look to add to play right away, but he's kind of one of those investments for later on in the season. I think he's going to gain more of a workload and more of a share of that backfield going forward. And he looked pretty good today against a relatively decent New England backfield.
Absolutely. And I see this as kind of the order I would go after him. James White, we know if your league is full PPR at the running back, this is a nice addition because you're probably going to get 4 to 7, maybe 8 catches a game out of him, kind of bouncing back and forth, because the offense is very similar to what they were running with Tom Brady. Obviously, Mac Jones is not Tom Brady, but they're trying to put those principles back into place. James White does a great job with whoever's under center. If they're targeting him, he's great in the receiving game, and that's definitely a great add. The next two, in my mind, now obviously if Darrell Henderson's hurt, that speeds up Sony Michel's value proposition or return on the investment. But these are almost like, these are for like 2 weeks out when I really think to see these two players really start to hit the ground running, no pun intended, because Sony Michel's getting up to speed with the playbook and really getting into the offense. But obviously that speeds up if Henderson's hurt. And Michael Carter, he's week 1, he didn't get as much action. Week 2, he split carries with all the running backs in the backfield. Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson. He actually tied for tops on the team in carries this week. I think they each had like 11, maybe. And in my mind, the sweet spot is if you can get him 15 to 20 touches a game, I think he becomes fantasy relevant as a kind of a sneaky flex option because he looks good with the ball in his hands and he's pretty electric. So I like all 3 of those running backs, but definitely James White's the one that's going to get you value immediately. The next 2 are probably a week or 2 out, and Sony is next week if Darrell Henderson's out.
And one other one, too, that I should mention really quickly is Dalvin Cook was banged up on multiple occasions in this football game today. If he's out, Alexander Mattison is a really nice add. And I know that everybody started him a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year in 1 week, and he burnt them all. But I do think that he has a really good spot if he gets that backfield to himself.
Absolutely. And one you mentioned in the chat that I want to make sure we honorable mention that some people will love and some people will hate is Zach Moss from Buffalo.
Yeah.
2 rushing touchdowns. We're not entirely sure what last week was, if it was truly a healthy scratch or if it was a health reason. Like, you've heard a lot of different things, and I don't know that we'll ever find out the truth. But in limited action this week, I think he had 10 carries maybe. He got 2 touchdowns out of it. He's not elite. I probably am not targeting him. In my mind, when we had the conversation earlier, it was James White for sure, Sony Michel for sure, and then it was like Michael Carter, Zach Moss. Both of those guys were on the block for me when we were having that conversation. So honorable mention, if these guys are not available, a guy like Zach Moss is certainly somebody to target because Devin Singletary, we know, can't be the guy alone. Like, they need to have somebody help share the workload. It was Breida in week 1 because Moss was out, but Moss got involved. So definitely someone to keep an eye on there too.
Yeah, Moss survived a fumble, and he looks like he's their goal line back, so that's probably a decent role. Who knows? We'll see going forward.
For sure. All right, so what do we got at wide receiver?
3 I like. Michael Pittman Jr., Tim Patrick, and KJ Osborne of the Minnesota Vikings. Who knew?
This is not a homer show, people. Not a homer show.
No, yeah, there's too many Vikings on here for no 1-2 team, I'll tell you. But Pittman kind of came into this one a little banged up. Game time decision. Looks like the Colts made the right decision. He was all over the place today for them. Unfortunately, they came up a little bit short, but he was targeted 12 times. He caught 8 of them for 123 yards. Didn't get in the end zone, but like I said, anytime Carson Wentz needed to get the ball downfield or move the sticks, that's where he looked, and Pittman was great today. So if he's available in your league, he absolutely needs to be rostered. And Tim Patrick is just really comfortable in that offense. Unfortunately, Jerry Jeudy's going to be out for a while. Teddy Bridgewater likes him. If they ever go back to Drew Lock, which I don't think they will, he likes Tim Patrick. He just seems to score almost every game. I think he's got like 8 touchdowns in their last 10 games played. Highly effective wide receiver. Didn't do a ton today. Caught 3 passes for 37 yards, but yet again, he scored. And KJ Osborne, we were talking in the chat earlier, and I was like, KJ Osborne does not belong on this list. This is ridiculous. And then he ends up 5 for 91 and a touchdown. He's tied for 8th in the NFL currently in receiving yards. If the Vikings defense is as bad as it's been the first 2 weeks, Kirk Cousins has to throw, and that's why he's on this list in the quarterback position. He's going to have to throw a lot. And teams are really focusing on taking Justin Jefferson away. Adam Thielen, but it looks like KJ Osborne has a role. So go get him.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, so obviously we've seen them in first 2 weeks. They've been down. They've needed to fight. They've needed to put up a lot of points to keep up with what they're giving up. The offense, because the tight end position. So that's the caveat there. The tight end position is what's really caused them to shift those targets to somebody else. And KJ Osborne obviously has been the beneficiary of this.
Yes.
I don't think that changes for a while because we know Irv Smith's not going to be back this year. Can Herndon become something for them? I don't know. I mean, they just haven't really done anything. Conklin, none of the tight ends have really solidified themselves as somebody you need to target. KJ Osborne's done nothing but produce when they've targeted him these first 2 weeks. And as that comfort grows, Kirk's going to have to target him because everybody knows that Thielen's going to do Thielen and Justin Jefferson's going to do what he does, so they need somebody else outside of the running game to target as well to help separate things and make it a little bit more difficult to contend against them. So, I think they have a nice schedule when it comes to matchups for, those lesser options to be able to still have a role. So KJ Osborne's a guy I'm comfortable putting at least at the back end of my roster if I need wide receiver help, especially with as many injuries as we've had.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's round it out. What are we doing with the tight ends? What's going on the waiver wire? Not
a lot, to be honest, Brad. Like tight end's tight end, right? Like it's as deep as a puddle as a position. And, if you're streaming on a week-to-week basis, you're trying to find out whatever you can find there. So today, Max Williams popped for Arizona. He was targeted 7 times. He caught them all for 94 yards. Going to go out on a limb and say that was probably his career best game, but I watched that entire game, unfortunately, and he looked really good in that one. We also have Jack Doyle. Jack's a nice sort of steady floor kind of tight end. Kind of gets you those 3, 4, 5 catches for 40, 50 yards. And every once in a while he finds the end zone. Mm-hmm. Today he was, what was he today? 5 for 64. That's tight end 1 numbers most weeks. So we'll see what we can do. And then the last one's really more of a speculative ad, and it's Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Seems like he's pushed Eric Ebron to the bench. Freiermuth didn't do a whole heck of a lot today, but he's getting targeted and he's playing snaps, so he has an opportunity. So if you're streaming or you've had an injury or you're really thin at tight end, maybe you pick him up now and use him later. I don't know. Tight end's tight end, Brad. It's not a lot there.
Yeah. And that's a tough thing for a guy like Freiermuth, who's a rookie, is he is my top target of these 3 because he is a dynamic athlete. They called him Baby Gronk in college for a reason. I mean, he's got that same type of skill set. If he's truly pushed Ebron, which we all kind of think that's the direction he's going because he's shorthanded, he's not going to just be dropping everything like Ebron does. Freiermuth's a guy that should get the trust of his quarterback and get more involved in this offense, especially because the offense is getting more on the same page. Like week 1, it did not look like it was clicking all that well, but still wound up getting a win. This week, obviously, was an opposite story. The running game finally got going, but the passing game was struggling a bit against the Raiders. So I think as they go on, I think Freiermuth becomes more of a play. He's kind of like Sony and Michael Carter. This may be you're picking Freiermuth up for maybe a few weeks out still, knowing that at least he's getting those targets. If you need a safe tight end play that is going to get something, but maybe not be an enormous producer each week, that's Jack Doyle. And then Max Williams is what the heck? I mean, that offense is so dynamic and has so much going on that it's hard to trust a tight end in that offense because they've got 3 receivers that they're probably going to target first, maybe even 4 receivers before they consider targeting running backs and tight ends and all that.
Totally. Freiermuth, too, is a good tight end all around. So he blocks a heck of a lot better than Eric Ebron ever hopes he could. So I think that gets him on the field a lot too, because that offensive line is not great. So Freiermuth can be an extension of the offensive line to help that run game. And anytime you're on the field, anything can happen.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that's it. We're out. We got you some running backs, some quarterbacks, some wide receivers, some tight ends. Don't forget, check out if you're in need of IDP help, Craig and I will be doing our waiver wires for IDP. So keep it locked in here. Like, subscribe, hit that notification icon, and comment below. Are there guys that we didn't mention that you think need to be targeted? We typically are trying to get you guys that are under 50% owned in most leagues, in most formats with ESPN, Yahoo, and some of that. So we want to try to give you guys the opportunity to get guys that are available, not guys that, maybe had a great week but have already been rostered. So
right.
Hopefully that helps you guys. Mr. Sullivan, as always, the pleasure is mine. You are the man. Don't forget to check out rotoheat.com, folks, and we will talk to you again next week.